Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
Most people who knew Baptista Truthen agreed that there was nothing in her to love, and nothing in her to hate. She did not seem to feel very strongly about anything. But still waters run deep, and nothing had yet happened to make her show what lay hidden inside her, like gold underground. Since her birth, she had lived on St. Maria's, an island off the southwest coast of England. Her father, a farmer, had spent a lot of money on sending her to school on the mainland. At 19, she studied at a training college for teachers, and at 21, she found a teaching job in a town called Tor-upon-Sea, on the mainland coast. Baptista taught the children as well as she could, but after a year had passed, she seemed worried about something. Mrs. Wace, her landlady, noticed the change in the young woman and asked her what the matter was. "It has nothing to do with the town, or you," replied Miss Truthen. She seemed reluctant to say more. "Then, is it the pay?" "No, it isn't the pay." "Is it something that you've heard from home, my dear?" Baptista was silent for a few moments. Then she said, "It's Mr. Hedegan, David Hedegan. He's an old neighbour of ours on St. Maria's, with no wife or family at all. When I was a child, he used to say he wanted to marry me one day. Now I'm a woman, it's no longer a joke, and he really wishes to do it. And my parents say I can't do better than have him." "Has he a lot of money?" "Yes, he's the richest man that we know." "How much older than you is he?" 20 years, maybe more." "And is he, perhaps, an unpleasant man?" "No, he's not unpleasant." "Well, child, all I can say is this. Don't accept this engagement if it doesn't please you. You're comfortable here in my house, I hope, and I like having you here." "Thank you, Mrs. Wace. You're very kind to me. But here comes my difficulty. I don't like teaching." "Ah, you're surprised. That's because I've hidden it from everyone." "Well, I really hate school. The children are awful little things who make trouble all day long. But even they are not as bad as the inspector. For the 3 months before his visit, I woke up several times every night, worrying about it. It's so difficult knowing what to teach and what to leave untaught. I think Father and Mother are right. They say I'll never be a good teacher if I don't like the work, so I should marry Mr. Hedegan, and then I won't need to work. I don't know what to do, Mrs. Wace. I like him better than teaching, but I don't like him enough to marry him." These conversations were continued from day to day, until at last the landlady decided to agree with Baptista's parents. "Life will be much easier for you, my dear," she told her young friend, "if you marry this rich neighbour." In April, Baptista went home to St. Maria's for a short holiday, and when she returned, she seemed calmer. "I have agreed to have him as my husband, so that's the end of it," she told Mrs. Wace. In the next few months, letters passed between Baptista and Mr. Hedegan, but the girl preferred not to discuss her engagement with Mrs. Wace. Later, she told her that she was leaving her job at the end of July, and the wedding was arranged for the first Wednesday in August. When the end of July arrived, Baptista was in no hurry to return home to the island. She was not planning to buy any special clothes for the wedding, and her parents were making all the other arrangements, so she did not leave Tor-upon-Sea until the Saturday before her wedding. She travelled by train to the town of Pen-zephyr, but when she arrived, she found that the boat to St. Maria's had left early, and there was no other boat until Tuesday. "I'll have to stay here until then," she thought. "It's too far to go back to Mrs. Wace's." She did not seem to mind this. In fact, she was almost happy to wait another 3 nights before seeing her future husband. She found a room in a small hotel, took her luggage there, then went out for a walk round the town. "Baptista! Yes, Baptista, it is!" The words came from behind her. Turning round, she gave a jump and stared. "Oh, is it really you, Charles?" she said. With a half smile, the newcomer looked her up and down. He appeared almost angry with her, but he said nothing. "I'm going home," she continued, "but I've missed the boat." He did not seem interested in this news. "Still teaching?" he said. "What a fine teacher you make, Baptista, I'm sure." She knew that was not his real meaning. "I know I'm not very good at teaching," she replied. "That's why I've stopped." "Oh, you've stopped? You surprise me. I hate teaching. Perhaps that's because I'm a teacher." "Oh, no, it isn't. It's because I'm starting a new life. Next week I'm going to marry Mr. David Hedegan." At this unexpected reply, the young man took a step back. "Who is Mr. David Hedegan?" he said, trying to sound bored. "He owns a number of shops on St. Maria's, and he's my father's neighbour and oldest friend." "So, no longer a school teacher, just a shopkeeper's wife. I knew you would never succeed as a teacher. You're like a woman who thinks she can be a great actress just because she has a beautiful face, and forgets she has to be able to act. But you found out your mistake early, didn't you?" "Don't be unpleasant to me, Charles," Baptista said sadly. "I'm not being unpleasant. I'm just saying what is true, in a friendly way. Although I do have good reason to be unpleasant to you. What a hurry you've been in, Baptista. I do hate a woman in a hurry." "What do you mean?" "Well, in a hurry to be somebody's wife. Any husband is better than no husband for you, it seems. You couldn't wait for me. Oh, no. Well, thank God that's all in the past for me." "Wait for you? What does that mean, Charlie? You never showed that you felt anything special for me." "Oh, really, Baptista, dear." "What I mean is, there was nothing that I could be sure of. I suppose you liked me a little, but I didn't think you meant to make an honest engagement of it." "That's just it. You girls expect a man to talk about marrying after the first look. But I did mean to get engaged to you, you know." "But you never said so, and a woman can't wait for ever." "Baptista, I promise you that I was planning to ask you to marry me in 6 months' time." She appeared very uncomfortable, and they walked along in silence. Soon he said, "Did you want to marry me then?" And she whispered sadly back, "Yes." As they walked on, away from the town and into the fields, her shoulder and his were close together. He held her arm with a strong hand. This seemed to say, "Now I hold you, and you must do what I want." "How strange that we should meet like this," said the young man. "You and I could be husband and wife going on our honeymoon together, but instead of that, we'll say goodbye in half an hour, perhaps for ever. Yes, life is strange." She stopped walking. "I must go back. This is too painful, Charlie. You're not being kind today." "I don't want to hurt you. You know I don't," he answered more gently. "But it makes me angry, what you're going to do. I don't think you should marry him." "I must do it, now that I've agreed." "Why?" he asked, speaking more seriously now. "It's never too late to stop a wedding if you're not happy with it. Now, you could marry me instead of him, although you were in too much of a hurry to wait for me." "Oh, it isn't possible to think of that," she cried, shaking her head. "At home, everything will be ready for the wedding." "If we marry, it must be at once. This evening, you can come back with me to Trufal, the town where I live. We can get married there on Tuesday, and then no Mr. David Hedegan or anyone else can take you away from me." "But I must go home on the Tuesday boat," she said, worriedly. "What will they think if I don't arrive?" "You can go home on that boat just the same. The only difference is that I'll go with you. You'll tell your parents that you've married a young man with a good job, someone that you met at training college. When I meet them, they'll accept that we're married and it can't be changed, and you won't be miserable forever as the wife of an awful old man. Now, honestly, You do like me best, don't you, Baptista?" "Yes," she whispered. "Then we will do what I say." That same afternoon, Charles Stowe and Baptista Trewthen travelled by train to the town of Trufel. Charles was, surprisingly, very careful of appearances and found a room for Baptista in a different house from where he was staying. On Sunday, they went to church and then walked around the town. On Monday, Charles made the arrangements, and by 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning, they were husband and wife. For the first time in her life, Baptista had gone against her parents' wishes. She went cold with fear when she thought of their first meeting with her new husband. But she felt she had to tell them as soon as possible, and now the most important thing was to get home to St. Maria's. So, in a great hurry, they packed their bags and caught the train to Pen Zephyr. They arrived 2 hours before the boat left, so, to pass the time, they decided to walk along the cliffs a little way. It was a hot summer day, and Charles wanted to have a swim in the sea. Baptista did not like the idea of sitting alone while he swam. "But I'll only be a quarter of an hour," Charles said, and Baptista passively accepted this. She sat high up on the cliffs and watched him go down a footpath, disappear, appear again, and run across the beach to the sea. She watched him for a moment, then stared out to sea, thinking about her family. They were probably not worried about her because she had sometimes missed the boat before, but they were expecting her to arrive today and to marry David Hedegan tomorrow. "How angry Father will be," she thought miserably, "and Mother will say I've made a terrible mistake. I almost wish I hadn't married Charles in that moment of madness. Oh dear, what have I done?" This made her think of her new husband, and she turned to look for him. He did not appear to be in the sea any more, and she could not see him on the beach. By this time she was frightened, and she climbed down the path as quickly as her shaking legs could manage. On the beach she called 2 men to help her, but they said they could see nothing at all in the water. Soon she found the place where Charles had left his clothes, but by now the sea had carried them away. For a few minutes she stood there without moving. There was only one way to explain this sudden disappearance. Her husband had drowned. And as she stood there, it began to seem like a terrible dream, and the last 3 days of her life with Charles seemed to disappear. She even had difficulty in remembering his face. How unexpected it was, meeting him that day, she thought. And the wedding, did I really agree to it? Are we really married? It all happened so fast. She began to cry, still standing there on the beach. She did not know what to do, or even what to think. Finally, she remembered the boat, and catching the boat home seemed the easiest thing to do. So she walked to the station, arranged for someone to carry her luggage, and went down to the boat. She did all this automatically, in a kind of dream. Just before the boat left, she heard part of a conversation which made her sure that Charles was dead. One passenger said to another, "A man drowned here earlier today, you know. He swam out too far, they say. A stranger, I think. Some people in a boat saw him, but they couldn't get to him in time." The boat was a long way out to sea before Baptista realised that Mr. Hedegan was on the boat with her. She saw him walking towards her and quickly took the wedding ring off her left hand. "I hope you're well, my dear," he said. He was a healthy, red-faced man of 55. "I wanted to come across to meet you. What bad luck that you missed the boat on Saturday." And Baptista had to agree and smile and make conversation. Mr. Hedegan had spoken to her before she was ready to say anything. Now the moment had passed. When the boat arrived, her parents were there to meet her. Her father walked home beside Mr. Hedegan, while her mother walked next to Baptista, talking all the time. "I'm so happy, my child," said Mrs. Trewthen in her loud, cheerful voice, "that you kept your promise to marry Mr. Hedegan. How busy we've been! But now things are all ready for the wedding, and a few friends and neighbours are coming in for supper this evening." Again, the moment for confessing had passed, and Baptista stayed silent. When they reached home, Mrs. Trewthen said, "Now, Baptista, hurry up to your room and take off your hat, then come downstairs. I must go to the kitchen." The young woman passively obeyed her mother's orders. The evening was a great success for all, except Baptista. She had no chance to tell her parents the news, and it was already much more difficult than it had been at first. By the end of the evening, when all the neighbours had left, she found herself alone in her bedroom again. She had come home with much to say, and had said none of it. She now realised that she was not brave enough to tell her story, and, as the clock struck midnight, she decided it should stay untold. Morning came, and when she thought of Charles, it was more with fear than with love. Her mother called from downstairs, "Baptista, time to get up. Mr. Hedegan will be at the church in 3/4 of an hour." Baptista got out of bed, looked out of the window, and took the easy way. She put her best clothes on, confessed nothing, and kept her promise to marry David Hedegan.